Okay, so today we're going to look at renaming variables and getting the correct values into our variables. So you may remember these two commands, dataset close all, and then our get command. So this is just going to get our dataset open. There we go. So we're going to look in the dataset now after you've cleaned it and everything. We're going to look for variables that need to be renamed. Oh, here we come across one. Q130, right? So we don't really know what that means. So we read it, are you currently or have been previously diagnosed with COVID-19? So here's how we are going to rename this variable. So let's Control C to copy it, and then let's go to our syntax. And you're going to just type in rename variables. And then you put a little parentheses, put that variable name, the equal sign, and then what you want to call it. We'll say COVID diagnosis, the parentheses, period, and then execute. And then boom, there we have it. So if you run this, looks like it worked. No error messages. And we're going to see, look, it changed it to COVID diagnosis. So that's how you do variables. Let's say you want to do a whole bunch of variables all at the same time. Here we have a whole bunch of variables which we want to rename. So we're just going to copy those over and put it down here. And then we're going to go our rename variables. Our little parentheses, and you see we've got 11 of these. Of course, you want to make sure you know what they are. I already peeked and looked at what those were. So we're going to call those hypersensitive narcissism scale _1. And because I'm lazy, I'm just going to do one of them. Oops. And copy, Control C, and then paste it a bunch of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I'm going to rename these. You're like, well, why did he skip one? Oh, maybe too many times. Because I know this variable is actually a attention check item from when I looked. So we put our parentheses around it, execute, and let's see if it worked. It worked. So if we go to our data set, you're now able to see we renamed all of these. Okay. So one of the things you might want to do is to now look and see, well, are the values for the different scale items exactly what we want them to be. So if you click on this, you can see, okay, well, this makes sense. 1's equal to 1 is kind of what we were hoping for. Sometimes Qualtrics does things you don't like. We'll come across that later. Anytime you have a yes or no option, it'll typically put 1 as yes and 2 as no. We want no's to actually be zeros, so we have to change things up a little bit. So the way to do that, so we've got in-person class, employment, work situation, restaurants, bars, that sort of thing, and COVID diagnosis, all with this 1 yes, 2 no. Actually, it looks like all of these are 1 yes, 2 no's. So we can change all these at the same time. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to transform and recode into same variables. And so in-person class all the way down to COVID opinions and action. And we're going to go old and new values. If there was a 2 there, we now want it to be a 0. Then you have to click the add button, continue, and then make sure you paste it. Don't run it, because if you run it, you can never be sure did I actually do it correctly. So here we go. When we paste it, oops. 1 second. Control C. There we go. We paste it. Now it will have all the correct values in there. So let's take a look at our data set. Now, you're not going to see the value labels didn't change, right? So those didn't change even though our data actually did change. So if we look, if we scroll over to these yes or no questions, we see now that they're all zeros and ones rather than ones and twos, but our value labels haven't really changed. So if we look at it, it still looks as though 2 is a no. So we want to change that. Here's how we can change it. We're going to copy all these guys, or gals to be inclusive, and let's go value labels, and then we're just going to go execute. You always put a period after it. This is just going to delete all the value labels temporarily. So we delete them, and you can see what that looks like. So they all went away. Okay, but let's say we actually want the value labels to change. You can now put 1 is equal to yes, and 0 is equal to no. But you don't put as equal. Instead, what you do is you put the little apostrophe, and that tells SPSS what to do. Let's see if that works. Okay, go over to our data set, and sure enough, now 0 is no and 1 is yes. So if we were to do a frequency analysis of those items, we'll go to display the variable names rather than the variable labels. If you right click anywhere here, you can choose which ones you want to see. What were we calling those? These again. Now it's going to be no's and yeses, and then missings as well. Cool. So that's how that works. Let's take a look at our data set a little closer. So these kind of look okay. You could actually change these as well. So because the way we have these are, looks like these are COVID beliefs, where 1 is they are ashamed, 2 is they're not ashamed. Oh, there's no question test here. I would be so angry or not angry. So again, you may want to make the 2's into 0's. So we could do the same thing here. Transform, recode into the same variables. Except this time you would put these in there, old and new values, and then you do the same thing, paste. Look at our syntax. Let's see here. And there we go, right? So, and then you do the same thing with the value labels, where you would redo those. Here, let's just copy these again. This time we'll say value labels, and then we'll go 1, yes. Well, actually, you would want to do these individually, right? So, because these are all kind of different. So, COVID beliefs, this first one, is ashamed or not ashamed. So, we're going to go back to our syntax. So, 0 is not ashamed, and 1 is ashamed. Execute. And then you'd have to go ahead and do that for each of these different beliefs with their own special label. So let's just run this and take a look. Now you've got this kind of working out. I'm not ashamed, or I am ashamed, sort of thing. Cool. Okay, so that's what you can do. And then let's take a look. So, with NPI, it looks like you'd probably want to do the same thing. In this case, what you're going to want to do with the NPI is you have to know a little bit about how the scale is coded. So in this case, we want each of these where this is a narcissism scale, where the narcissistic statement is coded as 1 and the non-narcissistic statement is coded as 0. So modesty doesn't become me would be a 0, and I am essentially a modest person, or excuse me, modesty doesn't become me stays a 1, I am essentially a modest person becomes a 0. So again, what you do is you go up to your recode into the same variable, and then you put in, your narcissistic personality inventory items, and the easiest way is to go through all of them and figure out which of the ones do I just basically have to change the 2 to a 0. Then you paste that. But some of them, like for instance, this one, NPI 4. For this one, the first item is not the narcissistic statement. The second item actually is. So for this one, you want to change the 1 to a 0 and the 2 to a 1. So you would go to your transform, recode in the same variables. For the NPI 4, old and new. Now this time you turn your 1 into a 0. Gotta get rid of that other one, and then turn your 2 into a 1. And then you would paste that into your syntax. So you can go through and find all of the NPIs that use this and do it all at once, and then that makes it a little bit easier. So that's how you recode into the variables. Sometimes you want to look through Qualtrics because it will do funky stuff like this. What on earth does this mean, right? So look at, it did something weird. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like you would hope for, it decided to do 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. If you look into your data view, we'll look for our HSNS, and sure enough, it put all these weird large numbers in there. So we got to change that because that's just silly. That's going to cause us problems. So you want to make sure it did this funky thing for all of them. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Go through and make sure it's this weird thing for all of them, so you can just do it once. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Okay. So you got to go through and do the recode in the same variables. Again, we'll select all of them. And now we'll get rid of this. So now if it's a 7, you call that a 1. If it's an 8, you call that a 2. It's 9. Call that a 3. It's a 10. You call that a 4. And if it's 11 or 12, you call that a 5. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and paste that. And when you paste it and run it, it will fix your variables. So you can see the data, it now fixed them all. But the data labels are still problematic, so we're just going to do that same code, which I showed you earlier, which is, you just go value labels, and then you put a period after your list, execute, and this just deletes all of those wrong value labels. When we go back, here is, it got rid of them. So you'll see it also did that funky stuff here with this CNS questions. It called 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. That, of course, should just be 1 through 7, right? So you can go ahead and change those. You can also look at your demographic characteristics and say, well, do I really want it to be 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7? Or do I want some other sort of numbering scheme? Same with your race questions. Looks like those are actually pretty straightforward. So yeah, that in a nutshell is how you change variable names, how you recode